Welcome to another episode of Breaking Bad Careers. We are super pumped to be talking about what is holding you back from career happiness in today's episode. So, I'm one of your hosts, Coach Eli. I'm an international career coach, and I've been supporting tens of thousands of clients over the course of the last 7 to 10 years in achieving this elusive career happiness. And we're going to discuss a lot of the finer points of what is career happiness, where are we missing cues when it comes to building awareness around what this is earlier in our careers, and what can we do about it if we're feeling unhappy. So, of course, we have my esteemed colleague over here, Coach Peter. So I'll let you introduce yourself, my friend.
Thanks, Eli. Good to see you again today, and good to see everybody as well. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Coach Peter, I am also an international career coach. I have been very blissfully doing this type of work for the past 24-ish years. I lost track already. Like Eli, been really, really blessed to be able to work with hundreds and thousands of individuals to help them find career happiness. The elusive career happiness conversation. So I'm just hoping today to kind of hash through this and share some of our perspectives, maybe a few stories, including our own. Right? I mean, we're not immune to this conversation.
Yeah.
And also to see what questions pop up. This isn't. At the heart of this is ask us anything. So if you have a question while Eli and I are talking through some of these stories that we want to share, by all means, throw it in the chat. Let's make sure that you have a voice and that we can see if we can't use your question to share even more with the entire audience.
100%. So, what was the catalyst for this topic? Right. I think Peter and I were just doing a review of all the people we've been supporting over the course of the pandemic and really discussing a little bit around the commonalities that have been coming up. And most of our clients happen to be, 10 to 20 years into their careers. And as they have navigated through, tried a bunch of things out, they've landed somewhere. And this career may have been the place where they launched it ever since they graduated from university, or it may have been the first career path that they ventured on and slowly but surely worked their way up the ranks, proved that they were very good at this career. But this one piece that is so important to career happiness wasn't there, and that's true enjoyment in the work that you're doing day in and day out. I know that's plagued me heavily in my career, is this idea of I'm good at what I do, and I know that I'm able to do the task, and I can feel happy that I'm able to get it done effectively on a daily basis. However, the redundancy of doing something that doesn't bring me joy caused a lot of anxiety, right? I started to look around and say, wow, is it just me, or why does everyone else here actually look happy? Do I have to smile? Is there something wrong with me? Right, like that I'm not happy by this. I have a good career. I'm making good money. I'm on a good path. Like, is it wrong for me to want something different, or to be yearning for something else? Especially the son of immigrant parents who, didn't really have a choice. They came in, they did what they needed to do. They had a secure career, and that's what they aim for, security, right? But I've been blessed with opportunity and the space to get creative and to really dig into how I can find this elusive career happiness. And I'm so fortunate to be in this space. And many of our listeners may also be in a similar boat, right? And I think we're giving you permission here today to say, yes, it is okay for you to want more, to want to be happy. It is okay for you to say, yeah, I'm in a career now, but that's not ideally where I'd like to be. And if I want to change it, then you have permission to do so. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Peter, based on what you've been seeing in the work that you've been doing over the course of not just this year, but the many years that you've been in the biz?
So I think 2020, aside from everything else that was going on, I think 2020 was a bit of a trigger for conversation around career happiness, around career fulfillment. I think you and I both know lots of people who went through transition, many times through no fault of their own, right? It was, we'll just slap the COVID label on it, right? And we're talking with prospective clients. You and I both have our own private practices, and then we also have our project that we work on together with that demographic you mentioned, these 10 to 20 year career trajectory individuals. But I think now more than ever in 2020 and 2021, some of my initial conversations really focused on Peter, with everything that's going on, I realized that, time is short and I haven't been making the impact I want to make. And I don't know why. I have a sense of why. I mean, I have a few things that have been going through my head about what makes me happy and why I'm not totally feeling in the flow at work and on my track, but I don't know where to start to figure it out, right? And that's why they called people like you and me anyway, right? But I guess to answer your question, Eli, like I'm just seeing more volume around this conversation. In the past, it was more about hey, can you help get me from point A to point B, or hey, I feel like I've hit a ceiling at my current company. Can we figure out how to help me transition to another environment where I might have more opportunity in front of me? Those more transactional conversations. And now I feel like these more spiritual conversations are coming up much, much more than ever before.
Yeah, fair. I think this pause period has caused a lot of reflection, right? Where let's talk a little bit about like where these challenges stem from. Like, why is career happiness so elusive? And some of the things that Peter, you and I had discussed were career unhappiness may stem from being very reactive in career choices, and reactive may mean taking ideas from others as it relates to what it is that you might choose to do with your career. Perhaps it's not even, really listening to others, but, stepping into a career path that you thought, you'd enjoy after school, realizing you're pretty good at it, maybe not feeling it, but then other people keep drip feeding you opportunities that sound pretty good. And then instead of taking the time to do the reflection, you just are like, okay, well, that sounds pretty good. I guess, because my buddy Joe thought this was a pretty good idea and it's available, I'm going to jump into it. And then after that one, someone else refers you somewhere else. And all of a sudden, you're 10, 15, 20 years in, and you realize you haven't had to make a choice or think about any of the career moves that you've made. They've been made for you, right? And that oftentimes leads to misalignments with meaning, because ultimately we've given up the decision. We've been super reactive to the things that have come along and rescinded control, and more so coasted on autopilot when it comes to these decisions. I don't know if you've seen other aspects that have contributed to career unhappiness, Peter.
Yeah. And two other things come to mind, Eli. So one of them would be, I'll just call it pressure, peer pressure. And the two things that come to mind around this is, where the peer pressure stems from. And one area would be family. I'm throwing parents into the peer category just for the sake of sharing this frame. But you and I both work with people from all over the world, and you and I have had plenty of experience with individuals from various parts of the world who are heavily influenced by parents' expectations.
Yeah.
Right. It's quite common. I personally have noticed it quite a bit in Asia, but Asia is not the only part of the world where this phenomenon occurs. And I've had plenty of conversations with individuals who are that, 10, 20, even sometimes more. I'm talking about people in their, late 40s, early 50s who, they're like, how did I get here? Right. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, or my parents wanted me to do this or do that. And, back in my 20s, like I had this gut reaction, like I wanted to resist, and I didn't know how to manage it because I didn't know if I was just being a typical, youngster, or if, my true nature was rebelling, saying, no, this is not right for you. You know what I mean?
100%. It's funny, Peter. I was, of course, but I was just in Hawaii with you, and I had the privilege of getting to meet your mother. And we got to sit with her and
Yes.
chat, thankfully. And this parental peer pressure. She's like, Eli, tell me the truth. You and Peter are working on this business, but is it safe? Is it secure? And and your mom, still at 80, mid 80s, right, is still concerned, worried, adding that pressure. I'm in my mid 30s, and my parents are always checking in, just like, hey, like, is there security? Are you feeling pretty good about that? And I just thought that was, something worth mentioning as well, because we even experience it day in and day out within our careers, even though we are quite fulfilled and we like the work that we've done, and we've done a lot of introspective work to get to where we are. We still get it from our parents too. So
yeah, we do. We totally do. When you frame it that way, I almost want to say, I think pressure was probably the wrong choice of term. Right. Certainly in some families and some cultures, there is significant pressure to go down a certain career path, maybe because mom or dad or brother or sister went down that path. And maybe there's legacy type of conversations going on. I don't know. But yes, of course, our parents are always going to love us, right? And they're always going to want to look out for our best interest. We're always going to be their child, right?
Yeah.
And so, like the questions my mom was asking us that day, that wasn't pressure. That was just genuine care and concern, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, when you have those types of conversation with your parents, it does, it influences your thought process, and we can't deny that, right? And so that's one thing that comes to mind. The other type of thing, I'll call peer pressure, and that's what I would witness in business schools, right? So having spent a decade now in business schools, working with MBA students, executive MBA students, specialty master students, even undergraduate business students, there's plenty of peer pressure around, what to do after the MBA. Right. And when we all know the nonstop narrative around do MBA become management consultant after graduation. And that pressure is there, whether we acknowledge it outright or not. And, I've coached plenty of MBA students, some of who did go into management consulting. Some of whom wanted to, but unfortunately were not successful in making the transition, and others who redirected before they graduated because they realized that's not the right choice for me after all.
But it's rare that we see that, right? I think you and I both got the chance to work in higher education within business school settings, and so many of the students would say, hey, I'm going into investment banking, or I'm going into management consulting, or I'm going to go into, you name it, high price point, high salary, prestigious job title. And, we would talk about it, and the main driver and the motivator wasn't so much the the strengths that they got to utilize, that the things that actively energized them throughout their life. It was really, I just want to make money. I just want to go in. I want to learn this. There's a lot of money to be made. And the same people that we were coaching over those times that we built good relationships with come back, 5, 6 years in, usually earlier than that, but typically 5, 6 years in, and they're like, I'm exhausted. I'm so burnt out. You were right. I never really had a desire to be here. I'd say that's like 80% of the people, right? I say 20% of people make a career choice and they get it right. They're in a career that really does energize them. But when we're going off of external motivators, whether that's financial gain to be made from a career, whether it's the prestige of the title and how you're going to be perceived by your friend groups, by your parents, by your peers, by other colleagues, these external motivators tend to deteriorate over time, right? They stop being so important. And that's why when you get like 10 to 20 years in, you're like, okay, that stuff isn't as important as it used to be. However, you do 10 to 20 years in, you do start getting stuck. Then it's like concerns around, well, what if I start making less money now? I can't make less money. I have this lifestyle that I've created. I have bills I need to pay. I have a family that I need to feed. How am I going to make a change? I need to keep this up. Or it's, I can't let down my family and friends. They depend on me. They depend on me to be doing this work. Or it's just like, what, am I going to start at the bottom of a totally new profession? And then these concerns and these fears just start like bubbling up based on the initial decisions people made. But those fears are ungrounded, right? I think we've seen it time and time again where we had clients face those fears, maybe start something new, maybe just pivot slightly, make a lateral move. In fact, sometimes see increases in the career moves that they make, leveraging their transferable skill sets and making steps towards career happiness. And that's, I think, something that's important to share here. It's like career happiness isn't like a flick the switch on just by changing these things and finding the next thing, right? I think it's taken me well over a decade to shift from the careers that I've had into a position where I feel I wake up super, super energized to be doing the work that I do. And it's not easy, and I'm not making nearly as much as I could be making had I been continuing to work for somebody else yet. But damn it, Peter, I'm thrilled. I am thrilled to be working with you. I'm feeling good every single day, doing work that energizes me, working with people who are ready to take on new perspectives when it comes to their career and really dig into who they are, and this has evolved over time. Career happiness comes over time, but it comes through deliberate action, deliberate steps. It comes through this self-awareness that, yeah, I do this stuff that's pretty good and I'm okay at it. And I'm like really good at it, but damn it, I want to be happy. Yeah. I don't know.
It's always our wish, right, that anybody we work with, or for that matter, if we would like to be very philosophical for a moment, wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody had the opportunity to just even have 5% more career happiness in their lives, right?
Yeah.
And had the same energy that you have when you wake up in the morning and that I've been blessed with for the past 20 years. The moment I found my space, my center in career coaching, it completely changed my life, right? And so, I was thinking about what you use the word fear. Something else that we've seen, at least I have quite a bit, with this 10 to 20 year kind of demographic. Sometimes even with younger professionals. I mean, you have kind of early career lawyers, early career investment bankers, early career consultants, is like this pretty overwhelming sense of apprehension that, like, I've invested so much time and energy and money and intention into this career path. And if I make a career shift now, even though like my heart tells me, yeah, I need to make a change to find more happiness. But if I make this change, how can I be sure that I'm going to find myself in at least an equal situation, or maybe even in a worse situation than the one I'm currently in.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally think that's when you approach it the right way, you mitigate the risk massively when you do it the right way. But nonetheless, it seems to be, a perception. This fear is a perception. It's a real perception out there.
Yeah. Well, we're not taught how, Peter. I can't, like, no one taught me how to do this. I tell the story all the time to people that I'm meeting, new clients. I was like, man, when I met you back in London, you taught me this phenomenal strategy on how to like really take inventory of who I am and what career happiness really means to me based on my intrinsic motivators, the things that I truly enjoy, right? And I was reflecting actually with a client earlier today, and he was asking me, well, how'd you get here? And I was like, honestly, I don't want to say it was luck, but it was a lot of trial and error. I think I could have gotten to where I am much quicker had I been educated on the fact that I have all this data that lives within me that I could be taking inventory of and that I could utilize to mitigate the risk of making a bad decision, right? And most of the time you go off a limb, it's like, I guess I'll try this. Oh yeah, okay, well, so-and-so said this, like, I guess I'll try it. And not to say there aren't tons of things that you learn along the way. I know that a lot of I don't even call them missteps. They're part of my journey. They're part of my story. They made me who I am today, and I use them. So regardless of where you're at, I think everything that you've done up until now is so important because it's giving you data, whether that data is positive things I have enjoyed, or the data is like, I definitely don't ever want to do this thing again, ever. And it's a career education piece that I think is really missing that can help mitigate those.
So I want to pick on a distinction here. You mentioned this idea of experimenting, right? And trying something and seeing how it goes and seeing what we can learn and whatnot. I agree. I think it's very valuable. As a coach, I'm the first one to say, look, part of the journey is experimentation, right? You're not going to work with a coach, no matter how great they are, no matter how great their process is, no matter how amazing their tools and resources and network is. To use the analogy you used earlier, it's not just like flipping a switch, right? You don't work with a coach or go through a program or earn an MBA or any other degree or certification, and then the moment that's done, then suddenly everything's figured out and the lights turned on. No. However, I think if I were to put a label on it, it's like an informed experimentation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like if the scientists in the lab, they don't just throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. They do experiments based on existing data, right? And then they try to take their research in different directions based on the data they have. And 100%. So I think it's a perfect analogy for experimenting. I think it's okay to try something maybe without 100% certainty on the path, but 100% certainty on the reason why you're trying that path.
Yeah, man. I couldn't agree more. That kind of feeds into this question that we got from Nicole Sanchez here. I've put it up on the screen.
Oh, right on. Hi, Nicole.
Says, taking risks can be perceived as irresponsible when you have a family to financially support. How can you or do you balance this while working to achieve career happiness? Peter, I think you've actually lived this one. So.
Yeah. I'm not sure which angle this question is coming from, Nicole, but I'll try to take it the way I perceive it. There are ways I'm going to focus on the risk part. There are ways to mitigate the risk, which has a lot to do with this internal data that Eli was talking about, right? As coaches, we would never we would never coach somebody out of the reasonable sustainability of taking care of their family.
Never.
Of course not, right? But to mitigate risk, our proposition is that it starts with an inside-out approach, right? And it's the same with leadership. It's the same with team building. It's all inside-out stuff, right? So, but when it has to do with career and career transition and finding career happiness, it specifically is about looking at your intrinsic career motivators, or at one's intrinsic career motivators. So just to throw out a bit about some of the methodology that Eli and I have become fond of, and which we have developed, we've kind of increased our sophistication in working with these topics and these tools. Things such as, I'll start with the most important one that we are using most often, and that's what we call dependable strengths, right? A dependable strength is a strength that we can rely on for a sense of fulfillment and meaning, right? It's not just any old strength for the sake of being a strength. So the example I give most often would be spreadsheets and data analysis, okay? I can do those things. It takes me a little bit of extra effort to do them. I'm not anywhere near as strong as doing that type of work as Eli is, especially given that Eli is a digital native and I'm not, right? But I can do it. And when I get the hang of a particular project, I can do it pretty darn well. But I hate it, frankly. I just, it doesn't float my boat. I don't get any energy from sitting in spreadsheets all day and managing projects. So whenever possible, I outsource it. And in our partnership with Eli and myself, the reality is that Eli has the fun of dealing with most of the data, right? And in my private business, same thing. And when I was in higher education, same thing. I would find the right people on the team to handle the data. So on the other hand, things like coaching and advising and making presentations and, some of the softer skills are way, way more in my wheelhouse. And so they would be more of the dependable strength, which means that when I get to utilize those strengths and express myself through those strengths every day, I know I'm going to be more productive on behalf of my employer. And in this case, I'm my own employer, right? I'm going to be a better team member, right? And so when Eli and I are doing our projects together, I hope I'm showing up more of my best self because I'm leveraging more of my dependable strengths, and vice versa. And I can testify from working with Eli that this very much is the case. And then there's the umbrella term which we're talking about today, which is happiness. The more I personally get to use these types of dependable strengths, the more satisfied I am every day. It sounds very simplistic, but I can't underemphasize the power of what I'm trying to describe here. So dependable strengths is one of those buckets. Another way of looking at strengths is getting some 360 feedback from people around you. There's a process I'm familiar with from the University of Michigan. It's called the reflected best self. And that it's a very simple exercise where you reach out to people around you who have seen you at times when you've been delivering excellence. And you ask them for feedback. You ask them for anecdotes, right? And there's a process of analyzing these anecdotes and identifying patterns of excellence within them, right? So on the strength side, these types of things can help us mitigate the risk of making irresponsible decisions. Okay, I'm going to toss it over to Eli because Eli can talk more about the values and some of the other topics that we talk about.
You got it, Nicole. She says it sounds simplistic, but it's brilliant. Most employers focus on improving or developing weaknesses instead of building on where you are strong. It's unfortunate. That is unfortunate. I think employers are now starting to, or good leaders or good managers should be stepping in, having one-to-one conversations, really laying out what those strengths areas are with you on a one-to-one basis and make sure they're leveraging that. Because at the end of the day, they want to really be strategic, then they play to the strengths of their people, right? And
yeah, I would, sorry to cut you off, but I would also add, you know, we're not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses here. We're not suggesting that understanding our weaknesses isn't valuable. Of course it is, right? But from a developmental perspective and a career decision-making perspective, a weakness-based model, what we found is that it is not anywhere near as powerful as a strength-based approach. And with a strength-based approach, you can still acknowledge your weaknesses and maybe pick one or two that you want to work on to develop. But the sense of career happiness and the sense of productivity and teamwork and so many other things becomes, I don't know, the trajectory of all of these things is, from our experience, is so much more meaningful and impactful when we can build upon our strengths and, yes, work on a few weaknesses here and there. Again, we're not suggesting they aren't important, but it's really more about exactly where is the focus.
Just to touch on another part of this question. It's a pretty loaded question, Nicole. I appreciate you asking it, though. So it's this aspect of like making irresponsible decisions when you have to financially support someone, a group of people, right? They rely on you. And where Peter is coming from is, yes, if you take inventory of what you want, you can mitigate the risk that you're going to make the wrong choice. But does that mean you're going to be in a financial position exactly where you were at before in a career that you spent 10 years building up as like the manager or director of a accounting department, or the manager or director of a team, or an individual technical contributor doing some of the more complicated work for your organization, and you want to make a total shift into something else? Well, there has to be some type of phase in, phase out approach to really mitigate that risk as well. It's not just unless you have the appetite for changing your lifestyle a little bit. I tell my clients often that I've gone from 6 figures back down to 50% of that at least 3 times in my career, and I'm in one of those positions where I was on a very good 6-figure salary not that long ago, and I am probably halfway between where I was yet again for the 3rd time in my career to date. However, there's this concept. I love it. It's actually a Stoic philosophy concept on basically like fasting and living and putting yourself in a position to live in the condition that you so feared, right? So giving yourself the space to say, okay, well, what if I was only earning this much? What would I have to give up? And maybe even trying to live that lifestyle before you actually have to go to it making what you make, right? So if you're shopping at Whole Foods, and I went to Whole Foods in Hawaii with Peter, and I was like, Jesus, did I just pay this much for groceries? And
it's the price of paradise, Eli.
Yeah, it's the price of paradise, right? Maybe it's different in Hawaii, but compared to like, okay, well, I can still get organic food from Lidl, which is now popping up all over the United States, and it's in Europe, right? And it's like, okay, well, normally I would buy, steak and like all this stuff. Well, what if I just went, for like rice and beans mostly this week, and I really cut my costs? And maybe it's not going shopping for clothes, but let me just see what it feels like to wear the same thing or something like a little bit less, less stylish, for this week, right? Or these 3 or 4 days, right? Are people going to say anything? Are they going to judge me for it if they see me wearing the same thing? I used to do these practices all the time, and it kind of got me to a point where as I would make more than make less and I had to get frugal, I wasn't really afraid of dropping down yet again, because I knew that I had my expenses under control. I knew that I have enough savings where if I need to dip into them, it wouldn't be for a long time because I can manage my expenses. And really, where most of us have issues is not on how much we're earning, but it's how much we're spending. So that's not to say, with children and with everyone that you eventually have to care for, those expenses aren't going to go up and you need to be more careful. But then you can take a more practical approach to maybe phasing out what you do. So, some people, I've had clients who are like, okay, well, in my job, I wanted to negotiate a 4-day work week, right? And I recently had a client go to his boss and negotiate a 4-day work week where they did not dock their pay. They weren't like, oh, 4 days, you have to work 10 hours Monday through Thursday. No, they're still focused on an 8-hour work week, Monday through Thursday. They gave themselves that Friday to start focusing on that next career. And that's something that they're going to be able to do now every Friday going forward. It was a challenging conversation. There was a lot of fear around having that conversation, but the employer really respected and appreciated and valued the work of this contributor, right? And this is not the first time I've seen that happen, right? There are also possibilities of saying, okay, well, I want to go to not quite part-time because you still want the benefits to care for your family, like health and wellness benefits. So you can drop down to just above 30 hours and, it's not a part-time job, it's still full-time, but you negotiate it that way. And maybe you will take a slight cut in pay, but at least you'll have your benefits. And then you, again, free up some time to focus on launching what it is that you might want to launch. So there are so many different approaches one can take to start thinking about making these pivots towards approaching a career that will grant you more fulfillment aligned with your purpose. But first, before you do any of that, it's what the heck is my purpose? Like, what is it that I want to do next? What can I do to figure it out? And that's where a lot of the skills that Peter talked about, pulling the strengths, values, interests, likes, dislikes, and using that to figure it out are going to be super, super helpful. But hey, Nicole, don't be afraid to just speak up at work and ask the question about, what does a 4-day work week look like? And, if people get triggered by that, well, that's on them. It's not on you. And you're just asking a question. So.
Yeah, look, I would also add that it's only irresponsible if you don't take the time to figure it out and have a plan and have a strategy rooted in some type of data. And the type of data we're talking about here is quite qualitative, right? Let's be frank, right? But it's only irresponsible if you don't have a plan and a reasonable plan, and involve in your question mentioned family, so involving family in the conversation, and making a plan together, right? The other thing I want to throw out there is, how responsible is it to continue down the same path with the potential health impacts of stress, and the potential impact on your relationships that your stress at work or your stress on your career path is bringing you? I would pose the question: is that responsible?
Yeah, fair. That's a strong redirection there. So as we try to navigate through and figure out this career happiness, as we're having conversations, the stuff that comes up the most with a lot of our clients, and Peter, correct me if there are things that I'm missing here, but it's the blame game starts happening, and the blame game never reflects back on me. It often goes to, well, it's my company just does not care enough about its people. And the culture that they breed is a very patriarchal culture, and it's rooted in X, Y, and Z, and those all may be fair points. However, there's something deeper, right? Or I'm never going to make enough money in this role. I just need to move. I need to switch either fields. I need to switch companies somewhere that's going to pay me more for the existing work that I'm doing, right? Or it's it's this market. This market just totally stinks. There's no job opportunities. Unemployment's through the roof. There's saturation. Every time I apply, it says there's like 500 other people that applied for this job. How am I supposed to compete against that? How am I ever going to be able to shift, right? Or like how I'm losing motivation from this, or maybe I'm just like not doing as good of a job as I could be doing, right? And it's these problems that keep coming up, but at the end of the day, Peter, do these sound like the real problems?
So, no, they don't, Eli. In my private practice, I call this the false problem, or I call them false problems. The company one is it comes up sometimes, but it's not the most common. I hear things like, "Oh, it's the market, it's COVID, it's high unemployment.
I don't have enough time." Right.
I don't have enough time. And on the COVID thing, I'm not saying that it hasn't hit the economy in certain sectors harder than others, but Eli and I have been career coaching throughout the entire pandemic, and we are seeing people land jobs.
Yeah.
We are seeing people land good jobs that they are happy about. Okay. So look, the data out there, the hard data on the economy, it's there for sure, but don't let it paralyze you, because we're seeing people land jobs. We're seeing people make transitions despite everything that's going on, right? So that's a false problem in my mind. A big one I hear is my resume is not good enough, right? And they're playing the comparison game.
Mm.
My resume doesn't, my friend Bob, his resume is way better than mine.
Yeah, or they're asking about Jill, like this many years experience and this skill or this preferred qualification in my resume doesn't match up to what the demands are.
Right. And those are all, look, those are all challenges, but they are false problems in the sense of taking action towards something more meaningful, right? They shouldn't paralyze you.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So,
yeah.
So
what are the real problems, Peter? Like that's the question that comes to my mind. If these are false problems, what are the questions we should be asking ourselves then? If we think that these are the things that are holding us back, when in reality they might not be. And what are the things that really are holding us back in this case?
So I am definitely no psychologist. But I don't think the lack of that qualification prevents me from sharing that I think it's fear. I really think it comes down, and many times, not all the time, but many times it comes down to some type of a deep-seated fear of change and what the impact of that change might look like. And the perception, to the question Nicole brought up, the perception of whether it's other people seeing what might look like an irresponsible decision, or a spouse or family member seeing me make a decision that might be framed irresponsibly. It might be something like that, but what I see most often is quite simply, it's at a high level, it's like the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
We aren't taught career development 101 or career decision-making 101. We're not taught this stuff in school. For the most part, there are certainly, some high schools that teach this stuff, or they try to teach this stuff. And there are some universities and schools that try to teach this stuff. But by and large, we're just not taught this stuff in any meaningful, concrete way that's memorable, that gives us these skills that we can take through the rest of our lives. So when it comes to the fear, it's like the fear of the unknown, but not knowing that there is actually a way to make more strategic decisions. And they just don't, it's like, I don't know what I don't know about financial planning, for example. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a wealth manager. And that's why I would hire a wealth manager to help me with my assets, right? For career development, I feel like so many conversations I'm having are educating people and bringing them out of this fear that there's no way forward, when you and I both know that we can dissolve that particular fear with a very straightforward methodology.
Yeah, 100%. And these concepts of like, oh, well, if I start working with you, I just don't have the time right now. I don't have the time to do this. I have work at home. I have to go to work, and then I'm stressing about work, and then I have to do this for my family. I gotta cook. I gotta, I make time to exercise. That's important to me. So, it's just like, I don't have enough time. But deeper than that, it's not I don't have enough time. It's I'm not prioritizing myself or this career transition or the time to think about these things. And really, that's the problem. It's you are able to make time. You are able to set boundaries. All of us do. And that's where we get into bad habits. We get into these routines. It is easier to fall into negative routines than to build positive ones. And I don't want to say unfortunately, but yeah, building positive career habits and the things that we're doing day in and day out to ensure that we're taking onus and ownership of being happy in the work that we're doing and growing towards this contentment in the livelihood or the basically the book that we're writing of the legacy we're leaving through the work that we're doing. That needs to come with making the time to do it. And yeah, if you don't know how to do it, that's going to be a problem too, and that's going to prevent you from moving forward. But like Peter was sharing, there are very straightforward methodologies to figuring it all out. And that's why we're in this field. That's why we're in this profession. We help people go through that process. We help people figure it out. We simplify the process, and we help you make the time, and we hold you accountable to that shit. Because it's very easy to do it independently and say, I'll get to it, or, no. But no, not when you're working with somebody, not when you have an accountability partner, whether it's a coach or someone that you trust, someone close to you, a friend, someone that can hold you to this stuff, right? So,
Eli, sorry to cut you off, but when you were just talking, it prompted me to think of another quite common phenomenon. And I see this at every level of accountability. I'd say maybe less so with some of my private clients, which tend to be more senior, but certainly with this 10 to 15 year, and even earlier for sure, like just fresh out of graduate school or really early career. But it's this thing of putting the perception of other people and the needs of other people before their own happiness, right?
Yeah.
The tag on to that is that the inability to really understand what makes them happy, but they have this internal conversation, this internal dialogue, like, oh, if I make this change, if I leave management consulting, where I've invested 10 years into my career, what will my friends think?
Yeah.
And it just pains my heart that there's so much on the other side of that question.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, what can I fill this void with? It's, well, maybe if I work harder, and then I'll prove myself, maybe that'll help me get promoted. I'll make more money. That'll make me feel good. Or, and that's really just ignoring the problem. Or, maybe it's indulging in distractions, whether they're like, hey, I need this thing from Amazon. I need this other thing. I need these 20 freaking things that actually I don't need. I want them. And I'm looking for that instant gratification that comes from getting these things where, instead of like spending on these things, the investment could go elsewhere. It could go back into yourself, into figuring this stuff out. Right. And, it takes so many shapes, so many shapes. We have another question that's come up. How about people who have a problem with putting in 10% effort to get comfortable and then not putting in the extra 90% to be extraordinary? Lazy people like me. Hey, Tim. Tim's an awesome guy. I love this guy. He's one of
I need to digest this question. What does this mean, Eli? Reframe this for me.
All right. So Tim is saying, so people who have a problem with putting in 10% effort to get comfortable and then not putting in the extra 90% to be. So basically starting and putting 10% in up front, but then after a while, it's like, okay, like I need to keep going and I need to actually do way more than what I've just started in this process in order to achieve the outcome that I've been seeking, right? So it's like, so basically this question, or it's just a statement, it's like, it's so much easier to just kind of get started and get the gratification from the idea of getting started than to continue and build the habit is what I'm hearing from this question. And there's no easy way around this. I'm currently reading this book called Atomic Habits, which was assigned reading as I'm working on this new coaching program. And it's actually brilliant. And one of the ways that the author James Clear discusses shifting the way you think about cultivating a habit is, we oftentimes talk about ourselves in ways that showcase what we're not, right? So in the case of smoking cigarettes, for example, it's like, oh, I'm trying to quit, right? And people who say that typically go back to smoking cigarettes when someone offers them a cigarette. And, a week later, you might see them taking a cigarette. You're like, hey, I thought you were trying to quit. You're like, yeah, I tried. Versus, using more impactful language. So in this case, it might be, I'm not a smoker, right? I'm not a smoker. I don't do that, right? So it's really not the result that you're looking for, where it's like, oh, I want to get a new job, I want to do this. It's the identity associated with that, who you want to become, right? And it's, Tim, just because I know you, right? I'll say in your case, it could be, shifting the identity of what it means to have the career that you want, and that may help position the habits that you do on a daily basis to achieve that identity, right? Like, I'll share something for me personally, right? When I used to have a really bad temper. I had like a pretty bad temper. Like I would blow up so fast, and I hated myself for it. And I would always look at these people who are so stoic, and like they'd spill wine on their shirt and they'd be like, oh, I guess I should change my shirt, versus me. And I'd be like, what the hell? This is like ridiculous. I just put the shirt on, and I'd have a fit, right? And, people around me would get stressed out. They'd be like, what the heck? Like, it's cool, dude. I'm like, yeah, it's not cool, and I started thinking about my identity. I was like, oh my God, what if like I'm like this when I have kids? What if I'm like this with my future partner? What if, like, is that the person I want to be? So it's like, oh, I can, like, how do I shift this reactivity? I was like, I want to start meditating because I don't want to be as reactive. So I started meditating, and it fell off because I was like, oh, I'm not seeing results. But actually, I shifted perspective to like, who do I want to become? And I want to become this stoic person who responds positively, or responds very non-emotionally to situations that usually cause a lot of people to stress out. Because in work, in life, that's going to benefit me. And that's like when I want people to look back and say like, hey, who was Eli? It's like, oh, he was calm, he was cool, he was collected. He always had something positive to say. He never really lost it. He was just always mellow and responded tactfully in stressful situations. And that's the identity I wanted for myself, right? So, Tim, my challenge to you here is, what's the identity you want? So that way, when your daughters talk about their dad, and you're talking about yourself and what it is that you do, it's not like, oh, I want to become this. It's, I am on my path to become this. I am doing this already, right? And I think it stems around habits, and it's not that you're lazy. It's just, we're all there. We all lack motivation, but we lack motivation because we don't have the right incentive. And the right incentive is, how do I want to identify? How do I want to show up? I don't know. Anything to add there, Peter?
the word that comes to mind is clarity, or it's a phrase actually, clarity of vision, right? How clear, if you were to tackle the challenge that Eli is proposing, Tim, right? Who is it that you want to become? Who do you want to be for your kids? How do you want to show up every day at work, in your career? How clear is that picture for you? How can you take it from maybe 15% clarity to 20% clarity and then beyond, and continue to take baby steps towards more and more clarity? I saw a TED Talk recently, forgotten the title of it, but it had something to do with what elite athletes do differently than the rest of us, right? So we're talking professionals, Olympians, things like that. And it was quite insightful, and it was a good reminder. The two takeaways were this: the two things they do differently. One is they recognize the time continuum, and the kind of time continuum being, we have the past, we have the present, and you have the future. And you can't do anything about the past because it's already done. You can't change what you've done in the past. You can't really do anything about the future except focus on what you're doing right now, right? Focusing on what you're doing right now might mitigate something from the past, and it might impact your future. But in terms of what you can actually do in the moment, the only thing you can do is right now, right? So professional athletes recognize that time continuum and choose to focus on taking action right now. What's the best action they can take to become a better baseball player, to be a better team member, to be a better father, be a better husband or wife? What's the best thing that they can do right now? The second thing was about clarity of vision. The best athletes in the world are all masters at creating the vision of their success, right? And they do it mentally. And I think we've all seen professional athletes going through the routine, whatever it might be. It might be swinging a bat, it might be swinging a golf club, it might be jumping over a high bar. They run it through their minds visually, but that's not the first time they're visualizing it. They've probably visualized it for years and years and years and years in advance, but with so much clarity. And that's the rub here, is it's the clarity of the vision. So I think my extra challenge for you is, how can you build clarity around this intention?
Yeah. And 1% increments, right? 1% increments, slowly over time, build it up. And, knowing Tim, this guy's he's on the right path. He does amazing stuff on social media. Brilliant chef. He's gonna be like this chef that like does comedy, and he's like, yeah, he's all over the place. He's doing amazing stuff, and everything he's done has led him to where he's at. But again, it's just these incremental things on a daily basis with that clarity of vision. So awesome.
So Tim, send me some plant-based recipes.
Oh man, yeah, you should just follow him on Instagram. It's brilliant. So what are we're running, we got about 2 minutes left, right? So what are some of the solutions here that we propose? Right? You have all these problems, and actually it's the real problems, which stem from like fear, stem from a lack of clarity, stem from putting the needs of others before your own needs. Also because that's like conditioning, and also not being too sure what makes you happy, so you just take the decisions of others, right? Well, no, not anymore. You're not doing that anymore. If you're listening right now, you are not doing that anymore. What you are going to do is you're going to realign yourself with work that truly fulfills you, and you're going to do that by really digging in to understand what motivates you. What are your strengths? What are your values? What are your interests? And really taking that responsibility and not saying I don't have enough time for it, but rather prioritizing that time. And if you need help doing it, you have guys like Peter and I, we're willing to jump on a call, 30-minute call. We do it all the time. Go on our website, book a free coaching and discovery call at yourcareerstrategy.com. Talk to us. We'll help you get the process started. We'll talk to you about all of these things that are coming up. We live for this. What do you think, Peter? Am I missing anything with the solutions here?
No, I mean, we've been alluding to it the entire hour here, which is, the answers aren't out there in the world on the outside, at least not in the immediate term, right? We can't expect any company or any person or, to bring us career happiness. It really starts with an inside out framework. It starts with an internal dialogue. I like the terminology you use, taking responsibility for doing this internal work. And it might be with a coach, right? And look, Eli and I, we love what we do. We think we're pretty good at what we do, but there are plenty of career coaches out there who can help you with this, right? But there's also some really great books out there that can get you started on this journey. One of my favorites, this is an oldie, a very oldie, but a goodie. It's called What Color is Your Parachute? Right? And pretty much every career professional I know, has come across this book, who even leverages some of the tools and processes in this book. But it's a great starting point, right? If you just want to dip your toes in the water of what Eli and I are proposing here, grab a copy of that book or something similar to it, where you're being guided through some inward-looking exercises to help you understand your career motivators better.
Perfect. Well, for everyone that participated today, who joined us today, thank you so much for taking time and to invest in your career happiness. This is where it starts. It's awareness. It's understanding the concepts, understanding where to start, right? So hopefully you found value in the content and the stories and the anecdotes that we shared and some of the frameworks that we discussed. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, same time, same place, on live, and we're going to help you break those bad careers. All right, people.
100%. Thanks, Eli. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk with you in a couple of weeks.